Yeah.
I had a short chat with her yesterday.
Nice.
There are hard copies of the budget if anybody wants a hard copy on the front table there. Jason did.
Are they the same that went out in the email?
What's that?
Is it the same that went out?
Yeah. I didn't know if people from the public. Or some people like that. hard copy.
I read right on it.
Yeah.
I tried. What do you mean this game? Hello?
Well, just up.
Good.
Oh.
Like Christmas for the kids, getting their new sleds, skis, etc. I had an extra cup of coffee about 3 o'clock.
Christmas Day, too.
Yeah, same with me. Normally I'm done at 2 in the morning.
85 degrees. Great.
I was saying, at 4 o'clock I hear this chirp, chirp, chirp. The smoke detector battery died.
They never
I'm
go
like,
off
I just want to sleep. And then of course, once you're up at 4, it's I'm done.
They never go off during the daytime. They never, yeah. Drives me insane.
Did you just get back from Florida, you said?
Friday night.
Okay.
Then we're going to.
And I swear that's the way I'm gonna die. I'm just gonna change and knock it off the
Okay, where
ceiling.
was
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awful.
She didn't burn to death. She died of a concussion.
Okay.
One of his clients was Great Clips, which
Okay.
was
Yeah, I know Great
basically.
Clips. What did your husband do?
Market research, one of the market research company. In fact, he just kind of, last few months, has sort of transitioned. He's done Great Clips until.
And I did walk in
within the last year.
one piece.
But I've been for 7 years.
Did you always live in Wisconsin?
No, we lived in, grew up in Connecticut, all
Okay.
of us. But no, he would go to Milwaukee and, I mean, to Minneapolis and back.
Gail, I was thinking on your second note,
They just moved.
you know what? We're in now. And that's what we'll just do this, we'll do it again in a year from now, if that's the case.
That's I figured better on there. He's just better than what you can't
I'm gonna tell you, in the grand scheme of what money that they have and the other projects that I've got to believe are out there, you're gonna not be at the top of them. Did you drive? Did you get a snow? Oh, really? Good. Sophie, Pamela, come on. Oh, yeah. What's he doing now? Oh, really?
Watching
Oh, That's right.
We've got a reading going.
Ready? All right.
Born ready.
Call the meeting to order. Hear ye, hear ye. Hi.
It's fine, that can't.
6 o'clock, we'll call the meeting to order. All right, thank you. Approved minutes from 11:15:21. Second. Any discussion? Changes? No? Perfect as always. Thank you, Melissa. All those in favor? Thank you. Citizen comments? Board members feel like being a citizen? No? Okay. Our next person's leaving.
She's not leaving.
All right, I'm going to carry on to old business then. Tuition contract for the high school. want to go first?
That was,
That was our meeting.
you folks were going to establish a different
Yes.
committee to take a look at the different options. I'll speak about the cooperative school district
Oh,
plan
later.
committee, but this was, you
Yeah.
folks
So-
wanted to.
So we, yeah,
Kristen, how close are you to going?
Oh, I don't know how that projector thing actually works.
Okay, so-
I plugged everything in, I pressed all the buttons and nothing's going on.
So we're having technical
So
difficulties.
so you want to go now? And,
we're gonna see if we can get a.
oh, okay.
computer. So if there's something else that you can shift into one first, then.
So when you're ready, just let us know. We'll- Great.
Sorry.
No worries.
Interesting, no problem.
So, yeah.
All about technology.
So we went to, and you can jump in because I'm not sure you know about it. So we had the committee set before, and then people left the committee. And now we have new people. Darlene's been kind enough to stand in the last committee meeting, or the tuition project meeting that we went to, Jerry, myself, and we wrangled Tim Garrison into going as well. So we're just looking at, we need a solid committee to look at what was going on in the past so that we can have a start to the community, we're educating them as to where we've come from, where we are now, and what our options per se are moving forward. I have tapped some community members to revisit the Gorham and Freiburg options, just so that we know. And that's pretty much where we are with the need more people.
So-
Go ahead.
The meeting that we had, we kind of thought that, so it might be premature, we might not even need to create a committee to do this. It might just be easier to task a community member to look into Forum and look into Freiburg informally, just to see if those could be options for us to explore. Because we don't need to jump down that rabbit hole too far. If we can get some kind of preliminary information first, like is it an option to go to Freiburg? Is it an option to go to Gorham? Before we really even form the committee, so the committee has stuff to kind of adhere to. And then maybe the best thing that we can do is to kind of put forward our options, meaning Freiburg, Gorham, Conway, and then what does the Conway look like? And then we should kind of get that information first, and then maybe at some point during this the next year, 2022, have a hearing, a public hearing, for people to come and say, here's the information that we have. Where are people thinking about it? That we don't spend a lot of time. If the community's not interested in going to Gorham at all, let's not spend a lot of time there. If they're not interested in Freiburg at all, let's not spend a lot of time going there. But we felt that we need a little bit more information about kind of where the Conway situation is going, and then also find out what is the Gorham option, what is the Freiburg option, so we can present that to voters and have them come back to us and say, this is kind of where we're looking. Establish all of that, and then it is a reason to formalize a committee to look into any of those scenarios further, and we'll do that then. So we're thinking, we'll fish for information first, bring that to the community, get a response from the community, then we'll know where we need to go further. So that's kind of what our thoughts were.
That makes a lot of sense.
Can I ask, is the Conway option, is that being looked at as is? So like, is it being looked at as like full tuition for every child if we?
So Conway right now is, well, I mean, it's, my think it's the most realistic option, but it's layered right now. There's lots of different components to it to look at there. And we talked a little bit about that this evening as well. But yeah, Conway's got multiple options to consider. In the end, it's probably only going to be one thing to consider with Conway, but so we need to go through the motion and discuss those other things with it. So.
Any other questions, suggestions? Any other people you know that may want to join? It would be nice to have a parent,
Have we emailed?
a current parent in the school system. Doesn't be you two, but I mean, just a parent who's going to be affected by this decision.
Yeah.
How we put it,
Have we put in meetings or tried to?
Yeah, we've done
No,
all.
I understand. Of course, no, I
We can do it
fully
again.
agree. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not until the next one's February 7th.
Can you do it again?
And do we have it in the school
Yeah,
newsletter as well?
yeah,
We
it
haven't
was
asked.
all that
Yeah, we're gonna
stuff.
ask.
So I know you guys have, different
Yeah.
circles.
Yep.
So, and,
Yeah, if you get somebody that
Yeah.
would have, some interest.
That'd be great.
yeah.
So Jim, what would you like to do on the agenda? Do you want to?
Why don't we just jump to you in that segment? Can we do that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it would just be, provide continuity.
Yeah.
Okay. We're gonna have Kevin talk about the co-op.
Yeah, down below.
Yeah.
Do you want me to do that now?
Yeah?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was waiting for the acoustics. I apologize. You're so well out of time.
Rather than taking out the agenda, the other items you can probably go through fairly quickly, I'm assuming.
All right, I was just trying to be,
Which makes sense in that regard, but it's going to be the reports about everything. Might as well just kind of.
All right, so, hold on, sorry.
Got it.
All right, we'll.
See, I was ahead of you. That's
Yeah.
just waiting.
All right, so we're gonna go on instructional issues, a second reading and adoption of policies. We can just vote on these separately because there's only 3.
Make a motion to approve on second reading the public complaints. Okay.
Second. All those in favor, questions? Okay, good.
Make a motion to approve on second reading the reporting of child abuse and neglect,
Second.
JLF.
Second.
Any questions, concerns? No? All those in favor?
Make a motion to approve on second reading the video and audio surveillance on school properties, EEAA.
Second.
Questions? No? All those in favor? Thank you. All right, election of Erica Klein as world language tutor.
So moved.
Yeah.
Boy, was that lucky, huh?
Yep.
I know, I read her resume. I mean, not only is she, yeah, not only did she live there, I mean, you know, not just like studied French, she lived there.
Is the world language tutor the only position that she's going to be in, or is there another one? Crossover.
That's it for now. Right.
Yes, that's the one for now.
And is there an opportunity for this tutor position to become more of like a UA teacher position? That'll be kind of comparable to the UA? Just given her credentials?
Not for this year to do a whole new position, but the board could certainly consider doing that in the future if you wanted to add her as a,
Like a world language teacher position? But at that kind of UA hours maybe?
because you'd have to look at the time and the schedule and how that would work, the whole program.
She understands what she's actually asking there. Do you know what you were asking there? 'Cause it's a little bit confusing.
It's just, I'm curious, so the thing that
Because
I just.
we currently have we have our UA positions filled. So
Yeah, but my question is, the world language position?
could it become something
Yeah, like
like?
why is it a tutor when we're seeking like?
So are you suggesting that we should increase the hours for a world language teacher?
I'm just curious about why, yeah, like why is it a tutor position versus like a different kind of UA position?
Well, that's what I'm wondering why you're conflating it with UA, because if you're just talking about the position itself, why is it a tutor position instead of a more?
Or maybe it doesn't have anything to do with UA, but.
That's what I'm kind of thinking. You're
Yeah,
not,
just
you're not
like-
asking to replace a UA person with.
Oh, gosh, no.
Okay, that's what's clarifying.
Adding, maybe with this.
Now what you're saying makes more sense. So, that probably has a lot more to do with what we budgeted for this year.
Yeah,
So it's the number of hours we budgeted for that type of position. Because it was piggybacked on another position before, it was easier to kind of fill that. And we left it in the air that we wanted to stipulate some money this year for that position, but it wasn't going to be enough to be any kind of part-time position, actually. It was just basically funds that we could do it. So we're limited on the amount of funds that we can use for that. If we want to look into expanding that position for next year, we could certainly do that. But you'd have to get a personnel committee together in order to do that pretty quickly. It was possible. I think that the smartest thing to do would be, if that's something we could pursue, maybe Gail can just have a conversation with the person and see where we can go from there.
because is that the
Same
only
for
position
facility.
that's labeled tutor?
That 8 years ago or so, when we first instituted the position, Other schools had a world language tutor. They no longer do, but we weren't really looking to have kids come from Jackson Grammar School and be fluent in any particular language. We hoped that that person would teach with our teachers, and it was small. It was 6 hours or 7 hours, so it couldn't really be a full-time, not full-time, but a teaching position per se. In addition, to have it be that, you have to have a certified individual. To be a tutor, you don't need to have the full certification, so it just gave us flexibility in terms of hiring, like we always are running into trying to find a certified person and go through the alternative certification process. We're very lucky to have Erica being willing to jump into that role, but I think we've had one other certified individual, and the other teachers have all been non-certified people with an interest in language, so it just gave us a lot more options.
So given the way it actually worked out, it seems like how we set that up actually worked pretty well. It would probably be smart to continue with that if we hope to have any luck in the future.
She can always get someone more accredited, you can't, I would ask for more.
Exactly.
So more about casting the net and like getting somebody
Exactly.
great for the position. Perfect. Cool. Thank you.
Right, I'm just gonna do 7B. Oh, did we have to make a motion? We're good?
I made the motion.
Okay.
Second.
Second. All those in favor? Thank you. And then 7B?
Make a motion to appoint Barbara Robert as mentor.
Absolutely, second.
All those in favor? Great, and then back to.
All right, I give up on that. A few years back, I was asked to come and talk to all of you about technology, and I had a whole thing, computers, iPads, presentation, stood up, got ready to start. The power to Jackson went out. So I stood and just sort of talked, and I don't know, my computer works just fine with the projector in my classroom. I know how to use it.
No worries.
I gave up. So anyway, wearing my Jackson Grammar School uniform, as are you. If you don't have one yet, I believe the 5th and 6th graders have some more to sell. A little plug there. So I have been asked to come and speak with you tonight a little bit about the math professional development that we're getting here at the Jackson Grammar School this year. And it's there's a few tiers to the approach. First of all, my name is Kristen Groves. If you don't know me, I teach K1. I've been here a long time. So I am a part of the Math Lab cohort, which is a group of teachers K through 8, I believe, from all of the different schools in SAU 9. We are meeting approximately once a month, and we're meeting at the different schools, and we are spending a day at the different schools. Amy Frechette has been there, and Krista Bichet is the math coach for the district, and them and some other administrators are putting together some trainings for the different Math Lab cohort teachers, and we're doing a lot of cross-grade learning, cross-grade talk, some planning. We're reading a book together called Mathematical Mindset, so there's a lot of learning happening there, which the Math Lab teachers are then taking back to the schools and talking with other teachers in collaborative meetings and sort of spreading out what we're learning. There's also been OGAP trainings that teachers have gone to, and OGAP stands for Ongoing Assessment Project, and they have trainings for different facets of math. Recently, our 5th and 6th grade, 3rd and 4th grade, and special educator went to a training about the Multiplicative Framework. Am I saying that correct?
Yeah.
I can do the math, I can't exactly say their name. And again, that's all about assessing kids, learning what they know, and then using that to create dynamic lessons to move forward in math. And they're bringing that math back, talking with us in collaborative meetings and enhancing what we know about being math teachers. And finally, Krista Bichet is the district math coach, and she started off just coming and meeting with me and working in the K1, and we're expanding it, so she's meeting with some other teachers doing model lessons, doing some observing and giving us feedback, helping us to think about where we're moving forward. And finally, as a teaching staff, we're doing what, I don't know who came up with this term. I don't know if the district did or if it's from a book, but these things called mini hacks, which is basically to look at our mathematics instruction and figure out what is something that we want to improve and how can we improve it by making a really small change, implementing that change, and then looking at the data that comes out of that change and then tweaking the hack. So really thinking like scientists when looking at our mathematics instruction. And so thinking about how can we do these mini hacks throughout the year to improve our mathematical instruction. So that's kind of the overview of what we've been doing. I want to talk a little bit about something called growth mindset. How many of you are familiar with fixed mindset versus growth mindset? Okay, awesome. Perfect. So I'm going to start off with just reading a quote by Jo Boaler, who is the person who wrote some of the books that we're studying. She's out of Stanford and works with the San Francisco Unified Math District. The myth that math is a gift that some students have and some do not is one of the most damaging ideas that pervades education in the United States and stands in the way of math achievement. So here at the Jackson Grammar School and at SAU 9, we really want to improve mathematics instruction. We want to do that by encouraging a growth mindset climate, by integrating things like number talks, mindset messages into our math routines. We really want to be aware of our personal mindset and the language that we use. So instead of saying things like, you are so smart in math, we want to be saying things like, you really took on that challenge. Part of our instruction will include open tasks to encourage multiple pathways, methods, and visual representations. We want to make use of something called low floor, high ceiling inquiry tasks to engage all learners, and that means something, this is especially important in a multi-age classroom setting, something that all of the kids can access and they can go as far as they can go. So the access point is low, but the learning is high. And finally, we want to make sure that we're providing time and multiple avenues for skills practice in fun and collaborative ways. So a fixed mindset is someone who believes that intelligence is innate, you are smart or you are not smart. Whereas people with a growth mindset believe knowledge and talents can be developed through hard work, good strategies, and input from others. This is where you're really missing out, that I couldn't make my PowerPoint work, because there's some really cool graphs and charts here that really show that kids who approach learning with a fixed mindset, I am smart, they actually achieve way less than kids who go into learning with a growth mindset, which is if I work hard, I can improve. And you really see that as they go through school. So growth mindset is super important because folks who have a fixed mindset tend to avoid challenges or avoid subjects that they perceive might become challenging because they're afraid that that self that they've built around I am smart or I am good at this, they'll be knocked off that pedestal. This is unfortunately especially true with high achieving girls, where they will avoid subjects that they perceive as being hard, therefore not necessarily going into STEM type subjects. I can say this from very personal experience as a high school student, and I can also say it from current experience as a mom who is trying to help my child continue with the growth mindset. It's very, very evident, so it's super, super important for all of the kids, and grown-ups too. So, some examples of mindset messages that you might see or hear in classrooms here at Jackson Grammar School, and I would imagine around the district, are things like mistakes are gifts. Mistakes are things that we can learn from. If you look at brain imaging, when somebody knows the answer right away, there is not nearly as much brain activity as when a mistake happens and they are working through that mistake. Oftentimes in school, if kids know the answer right away, learning is not actually happening, they knew it, which is very different than learning it. So mistakes are gifts. Answers are important, but they're not the math. So if you know the answer, that's really great. Let's talk about your thinking. Let's talk about how you arrived at it. Let's talk about your strategies. You want to talk about each other's thinking. Kids can process things in different ways and they can learn from each other. And it's really important for learning to be able to articulate your thinking. And we want to make sure that kids and teachers and everyone can use multiple strategies and multiple representations to show their mathematical thinking and their mathematical growth. So I'll kind of leave you with the fact that it's really easy for the people around you to want to create a lifelong reader. Kids or parents read their kids bedtime stories every night. They celebrate their small successes, their baby steps towards becoming a reader. And those very same parents, when their child is struggling with a mathematical concept, can very often say something like, "Oh, it's okay, honey, I was bad at math too." And those are two really exceptionally different messages that we are giving our children, and our hearts are in the right place. We want to make sure that those messages are not being repeated in schools. Try not to be on my own soapbox here. So we definitely want to make sure that we are fostering this growth mindset in our math class. And all of this math work we're doing with professional development is helping us to get there. So finally, I'll just leave you with some ways of changing what we say. These are more for parents than teachers, but instead of saying, "Oh, I was never good at math," we can say, "Let's try to learn this together." I will say that last year I was a remote teacher for K through 6. I actually said that so much when I was teaching math to 5th and 6th graders last year. Like, wow, this is interesting. Let's learn this one together. Instead of saying this math is really hard, this is challenging, how can we break it down into small steps? Instead of saying you'll never use this in real life, you can say this is teaching us good problem solving skills. And finally, the big one, instead of I hate math, try math isn't my favorite thing, but I do like a good challenge. That's my spiel. Any questions?
Thanks.
I do have a question. How does your report card correlate with what you're doing in the math? Are you able to take what they're doing in class and that information, does it fit with the reporting that you're giving out to parents? Or do you think is there a point in time when you're going to need to tweak that? Or, can you appropriately describe to a parent in their report card exactly the kinds of thinking things and all that? Is it coming across?
Yeah, I would say the mathematical report, the report card is broken down into the different parts of math, so it's not simply, math. We use a 4, 3, 2, and 1, with 3 being sort of like you're doing grade level, you're where you should be. And so it's broken down into things like number systems and geometry and measurement and data. And so you are able to give kind of a picture of how they're doing in the different, there can be kids who are really great at geometry and not as good at problem solving and things like that. As far as how well the report card matches competency-based education, I think I would maybe defer the answer to a report card committee or something like that. I feel like as a teacher, I'm able to give information and then in my comments be able to really explain what that means.
I was just curious because when I was teaching and we would do kind of a curriculum change, I know that's not exactly what you're doing, we would have to then revamp, so that we were giving more accurate information rather than what we were focusing on.
They've been doing a lot of work with the report cards to reflect what we do in the district. So I would say that work is happening in conjunction with this math work.
And we also have all of the teachers here write a narrative to explain particular child's strengths and weaknesses and what they've been covering, as well as parent conferences each trimester. But I do know, like Kristen said, we are moving as a whole district. It's one of the goals in the strategic plan, is to adopt a reporting system where we can track the competencies individually, so it will be more closely aligned to where we're going.
I actually saw a CASA child's report card the other day, so I was really impressed with the narrative, which was a really long narrative and was, really expressive. And of course, then when you go with just, the scoring, you get a different picture, and really that narrative really does help.
Yeah.
Just wonder from a teacher's perspective how you were feeling that you're able to accomplish it. So good, I'm glad to hear that. Nice job.
Having lived through it, it's, one of the things that we're blessed with here is the small teacher-to-student ratio, and how deeply all of our staff really cares about our kids. And for parents that want to know beyond what the report card might be saying, the staff's always very engaging in that, and always very helpful in that regard. And it really does help your child get through each level of school. And my son's in high school now, and he's still getting really good attention to detail from his staff, and it works. It goes beyond what the report card necessarily says. If parents want to engage just a little bit, the staff all along has seemed to be very helpful in that regard.
Kristen, this sounds very positive all over for the students and the teachers, and I like the fact of folding in the parents to a different way, because I've heard all the things that you've said, both sides of it. And so you're teaching this to all the teachers, and I can see it certainly doesn't just apply to math, obviously. It's a good lesson and a reminder, and it will take time to change habit.
Yes.
But I think it will be a more positive experience overall in the classroom for everybody.
I hope so. I mean, the K1 loves that.
And I just have to say, I think that this is a great example of how a good presentation can be technology any day of the week, because I feel like I've learned a lot tonight. And it happened a lot of times. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Thank you. That was great. All right, so moving on to 21-22 budget status report.
It's in the packet. If anybody has any questions.
We're good?
You're okay, you're still in black.
I guess the Bartlett tuition piece, is that for next year's budget that's an issue, or for this year?
That's for this year's budget. I'll talk about that when we
Gotcha.
down to it. Yeah.
Okay, review draft 1, 22-23 proposed budget.
Would you like me to?
I would love for you, since I've asked.
I'm gonna use my growth mindset, so if I make mistakes, it's okay. Nice job. No, seriously, that is such a huge piece, and thanks, Kristen, and all the folks, especially at the elementary level, as far as content goes. People are good readers, they're good writers, and math is one of those pieces that, as you know, fear comes in, and then all of a sudden it becomes a big deal. So applying those concepts, tremendous job. So there are extra copies of the budget on the table in front of Kate. If anybody needs one, hard copies. What I'll do is I'll just kind of walk you through some of the big pieces and then move forward. So the cover sheet, summary 2022-23. You get the overall budget in the top half there. So you can see the operational costs. It's actually down 4.62% or $138,000 less than last year. Okay, and there are a few reasons we'll talk about those as we go through the budget. And then you see where the grants are added. So this year we anticipate about $14,000, but you have to raise and appropriate and include that in the budget. So overall, you'll see that what will be asked for, or what's presented to you, is $135,379 below what it was last year. Okay, and then the bottom half of that first sheet talks about summary of the proposed increases and decreases. This gives you a little bit of a feel for ups and downs in the overall budget. So the first part, that's salaries, all-inclusive, contingency, performance. So there were a couple of positions in the budget that you'll see. One was the combination of library media specialist and a technology person, combined for one position, which then in turn kicks in some benefits. But with the personnel committee, we did meet, we talked about all these pieces, and we brought those forward. And a lot of times, as you folks know, trying to find a certified person as a part-time person, it seems like it would be a good marriage for somebody with that level of skills to be library media specialist and technology. The other piece that was added into it was half-time nurse. Okay, so that is in the budget moving forward. You've typically contracted those services with Bartlett at about 20%, so again, increase that to make that happen. A couple of the other pieces that are budgeted, you have the teachers' policies that are in there, inclusive of the maximum that they could get for an increase. That hasn't really changed. But one of the big changes was the non-contracted folks, or your support services, your custodians, your maintenance folks. Personnel committee went through and kind of stealing the personnel committee report. But there were a lot of pieces that we've taken a look at probably 3 times, beginning in the summer, through the fall, and then most recently in the past month, to be more competitive. So, Mike and Kate, we're really good about what can we do to recruit and retain the best quality candidates. So one of the things they did take a look at was increase the starting wage for all those positions, and you'll see that later on, as well as taking care of the people who have been here for a number of years and bringing them up to a market wage. So basically, they're getting a minimum of a $2 an hour increase moving forward. And then some people, because we wanted to raise that salary scale, may have gotten a little bit more than that, but at minimum, everybody would get at least a $2 an hour raise. So that's built right into the budget moving forward as well. So all of those changes come in at a $108,000 increase. Doesn't mean everybody's going to get all those pieces, but it does mean that we budgeted for those moving forward. Health insurance came in at 12.73%. Remember, there was a significant drop in the premium prices last year, and with the pandemic and some of the related pieces, they're figuring it out. And we've heard, from different districts, some are up 24%, some are lower than that. We talked a little bit about this at the SAU budget in terms of sticking together. Everybody in the district will be on the same health insurance plan, which is a really good thing when you go shopping around moving forward. And then you'll see related FICA and retirement and workers' comp and unemployment. If you flip the page, just not a whole lot of change in that first part where it talks about special education, tuition, special education, all those pieces. The next piece where it talks about tuition, significant drop in the high school tuition. So the reason for that is because in 2021-22, you had 30.22 high school students, okay? And then this year, you have 21.86 students that are budgeted for next year. So that's a very significant drop. And then prior to that, in 2021, just so you get a little feel for it, is 25.4. So it went 25.4, 30.22, and then a big drop, 21.86. So that accounts for a $272,000 reduction in the budget there. Middle school tuition. So one of the pieces that Bridget really did was try to get a real accurate count. We'll talk a little bit more, but that tuition rate had been pretty stable for a few years, but with the volatility of the Bartlett enrollment going up and down, That did increase this year that we're currently in, and it's projected to remain there for next year. So I don't think we'll see a big change, but that's what happens when you go year to year. Unlike the high school, where those students are accounted for the previous year, okay? So we're using enrollment data from that closed, that's why it's 21.86. We know exactly how many students and how many days. Where you're kind of working on this, we're projecting out what it is, kind of a real-time piece. And that's the way it was before the tuition contracts as well. So you'll see a big decrease of $252,000 there. Maintenance pieces, working through, not a whole lot of big changes. You'll see an increase of $15,200, and that's for the parking lot.
It's doing stuff in the parking lot. I think it's also for the gazebo floor, the grounds contracting services.
Yes, that makes more sense.
So that's a project that you didn't have in there last year, and it's just an increase this year. Going down technology-wise, not a whole lot of big changes there. And then some pieces going through, and you'll see like there's a big drop in contracted services, library media. That's because it moves from one line to another, so there's an increase of that in the budget as well. So it drops from negative 20,000 and goes back into that salary line. Does that make sense? Okay. Architect services, last year you had $70,000 in the budget. This year that gets removed out. And then we'll talk at the facilities piece about what you guys want to do moving forward. But that really gives you the ups and downs, the big pieces. And again, that's that $135,379. We can go through the overall budget. It starts with line 1, and I'll just, again, pick specific pieces, and if you have questions, please just either probably raise your hand so I know who's speaking, because, again, the acoustics for me is tough in this room here. But if you go down to line number 8, where it talks about salaries for substitutes, you'll notice a pretty big change there. That's because, again, the Personnel Committee felt as though we needed to raise that to be competitive with Bartlett and Conway. So it went from $85 a day to $125 a day. And that's the biggest change on that piece there. You'll see the increases in the health insurance, and the rest are just kind of the statutory benefits. If you go to page 2, you'll see even down to line 46, you'll see the tuition pieces, the historical, and that's kind of up and down based upon the ADM and the equalized valuation. You'll also see at the very bottom, line 72, there's a line down at the bottom, and that includes the sign-on bonus that was recommended by the Personnel Committee. So that $5,000 for a teaching position and $1,000 for a support position, and that would be paid 50% up front, and then if they continue the year, the other 50% moving forward. The bottom of the page, you'll see some just staffing pieces that were in the budget. Not a whole lot of change there. Page 3. Not a whole lot of change in the top or the middle pieces. Line 95, you'll see the summer program and looking at increasing that a little bit so that we can get qualified folks for those positions. You can go to page 4. And again, stop me if you have any questions. And if you take a look at line 122, you'll see the nurse's salary, instead of contracted service, becomes that half-time salary to get a nurse in here for half-time. The rest of the Page 4, not a whole lot of changes. Pam works with Gail, and for special education, they budget for the needs that are in students' IEPs right now. They don't project out, these services might be here, might not be. There are some small lines that might have $500 as a placeholder, but otherwise, if there's IEPs in place, there's the budget for those services. If you go to page 5, and you look at line 131, salary, teacher, library media specialist. So you'll see that line is a full line there with a full-time position. And it also ties in with a health plan. We don't know what that would be, but we budget for a 2-person health insurance plan. And then you're also responsible for the teacher retirement because it would be a full-time person at that point. If you go down to line 148, you'll see contracted services in the library is zeroed out because that moved up above to create that full-time position. Bottom of page 5, didn't give you guys a raise. In there. Line 157, 158, one of the pieces is that legal professional services, so keeping that at $5,000, just in case, as you go through this cooperative study piece or looking at other contracts, you can utilize those services for consultation. The bottom part of the budget stays pretty much the same. SAU budget goes up for you folks, and that's based upon, again, equalized valuation. Page 7, this is the office of the principal. Not a whole lot of big changes there. You'll see that ripple effect of the support staff and some of those salary increases that are built in there as well. Bottom, you'll see maintenance and custodial. Those pieces are built in. Not a whole lot of changes. Page 8, you'll see on line 210 that increase to $25,500. That's the work that Jim was just talking about, the parking lot and the other folks. You'll see the next section is your bus drivers, supplies, parts. Field trips, hopefully we can get back to even more field trips next year. And that includes page 8. Page 9. The big thing is on line 236, you'll see that architectural services goes from $70,000, and that's cleared out of the budget there. And then down the rest of the page just gives you the overall budget. And again, it's a negative 4.5%. You don't include the warrant articles because we haven't discussed those, and those are not included. And then on page 10, you will see the grants. And again, some of those are what are called entitlement grants, which means that the districts get those through the federal government, IDEA for special education, Title I, Title II, and small rural schools. Budget. So that gets included in the budget, the amount that you appropriate. Of course, you get some revenues, and that will be part of the next presentation. So that's the overall budget. We do have Jim, Pam, Gail that can answer the hard questions. I don't know if you folks have questions.
I'd love to hear more about what's happening with the facilities committee, because I don't see a warrant article about that, so just so that we have that conversation next to this, that'd be helpful for me.
We'll get to that on the warrant articles. I'll ask if there are any other things that you want to consider and where you want to go with that.
Okay.
And then we can go back to the budget as well. When we start talking about the bus, or we talk about, if you want to add more things into the budget, that's up to you folks.
Okay, great.
Okay, it was a great job. Okay. All of the teacher salaries, the increases, really looking at everything proactively from the substitute, really well thought out. So thank you guys for the work on that. I appreciate it. Yeah.
It's important.
It is. No, hopefully it'll make a difference.
Yep.
Give Gail, she can't just hang a pot outside. So get some,
Free sweatshirts for you. $5,000 bonus and a new sweatshirt.
You only get the sweatshirt after 6 months. It's an alum night.
That's it.
Okay. All right, any other questions on the budget itself? Nope. All right, we're good on that then.
The warrant articles?
Yep, we're good on that.
Okay. So we can walk through these, but at some point you want to move, a budget number forward to the hearing tonight, and we can do that. And then, of course, the next step for those who are less familiar, the number goes on the warrant for the hearing, the proposed budget, and then you can amend it at that point as well, and you can make some changes. And then, of course, the following step after that in March is when you have your meeting, and then you can continue to amend the budget up or down on the floor of that meeting. It's best if you have your ducks in a row as a school board, as you folks know, and be able to explain those pieces. You don't want to make big, huge changes, but sometimes those things are inevitable, and you can put those. What you can't do is you can't wait till the last minute to add an article to the warrant. So the sooner that you begin to talk about articles on the warrant, the better off. So if there are things that you want, you can do that. But there are deadlines and timelines that have to go forward with that. So the first article is simply the budget that we talked about today, and hopefully before tonight you can move a budget number forward. The second piece is your capital reserve fund for special education. And once again, when you have these special articles, they are written for a specific purpose. So if it's in special education, you can't take that money out and build a building. You can't take it out and hire staff. You can't, well, unless you're specific to special education. But it's for those purposes. So just like maintenance trust funds. So right now, in the special education trust fund, you have 170, what did we say, 100?
It's 171, 436.
Yeah. So the question really is, do you want to have discussion? Do you want to place a number on there? 10, 15, 25, whatever you choose to. I usually defer to Gail and Pam. Pam has a real good handle on. A lot of times people ask, is there a cap that you'd like to put on there or not?
I'm sorry, last year you did put in 25,000.
Yeah.
That's what we found. So you actually have 196 in there right now.
And Pam, what do you currently think with the population that we have? I mean, because we discussed that 200 was good last year, and I know we were at 100 like 3 years ago, and we've moved it up to 200 now.
I think the highest I would recommend at any point right now over the next 5 years would be to get to 225 or 250. I think right now you're in a pretty safe place because I think things are starting to stabilize with students being in school, families moving into town or moving out. That being said, one family moves in with a significantly impaired child, that's $250,000 for a residential placement. If that happened, we could do many things. We could empty out the fund. I think you're pretty comfortable with 200,000 right now. But then you also have to step back from just the special ed piece and look at the impact on the tax rate. You want to keep it steady.
Right. So I'm thinking we have a bus thing, but we're going to go down as we move along, and we'll keep all that in mind as we go through. Okay, so we're fairly comfortable at this point.
You are. So if you wait a year and maybe play with it then. we are looking at a bus. for next
Okay.
year.
All right.
I wouldn't mind adding some money towards it because, it's there, it's not like a bucks fund or even like a maintenance fund for the buildings. It's what's our worst case scenario? And we kind of want to be covered for worst case scenario because, again, in any given budget year, what do? You have to go back the following spring and ask for a deficit spending article, which isn't good planning, if you can avoid it. And Pam said last year, it might have been the year before, he said 250 is kind of what we're looking at for a maximum. That's just, could be back by one student. And again, that's worst case scenario for any given student that might come into the population like that. But I think that we should be looking to build it up to that, maybe capping it at 250. And if we're comfortable this year, I wouldn't mind adding at least $10,000 today, just to keep it moving towards that target anyway. To put some into it, and the budget's already down 4.5%, so
Right.
it's,
I was gonna go through the articles and then go back and see like what else with the bus, and then if there's anything that we want to add for facilities, put it all out there.
well, facility will be going into the operating budget, so I think that we could wait on that one, but the other individual ones, I think that while we're on, we might as well knock them out, right?
Okay, let's just try to
We're only-
get a picture.
Well, we're only talking two other articles along with it, so,
Okay.
and one of them's already set, so the next thing to discuss is buses.
What do you guys think?
I think Jerry's point's well taken. I think that incrementally adding money to it and be prepared for that scenario versus saying next year, let's ask for 50,000 to get the 250. So, making sure that it also stays in the awareness of the Jackson community that this is something that we support and this is something that we stand up for. So I support adding 10,000 to this year.
Yeah, I do. So that way somebody doesn't come back and say, well, you didn't do anything last year, and well, why not? Because, we're in a comfortable situation. At least if we put what is not a small amount, but, some amount in there.
I'm comfortable with that.
But Pam's the
Yeah.
I do want to mention, Jen's correct. Several years ago, I said 200,000 and you're going to be really comfortable. We'll be in a really good place. Over those years, programs have increased their cost significantly because they've decreased. The number of programs in our state have decreased, the availability right now. Schools have closed, they've decreased the number of students that they're accepting. Students are being placed from other states so the enrollment has shifted, so their costs have gone up. So, I think it's something to be aware of. I know that you all have always been really responsive to it, so. That's
It's not
the
just
big
somebody
shift.
moving in, we're just one car accident away
Exactly.
from needing it, for
Exactly.
anybody. So,
Yeah, it's a rainy day fund versus a capital outlay, and that's why, to me, it makes sense to at least put something towards it.
yeah,
getting
just
towards
recommending
it.
we go up now, and we can afford it, we're good, we do the buses and that. So 10,000, is everyone comfortable with that?
Yes.
Do we need to make
Does
a
anybody
motion?
need to make a motion, Jerry, or just?
No, because when we vote on
Yeah.
Yeah,
It'll
the
go
actual
in.
article,
Yeah.
whether we support it or not, after the budget hearing,
Okay.
then that's what formalizes it.
Yeah. Okay. Article 3 is your school bus fund. You have about $86,000 in there right now. The cost of a new bus is $115,000. Jim can speak to your adoption sequence of buses. But it does look like you're going to need to purchase a new bus next year.
So Kevin, one of the things I think we're a little bit confused on is what's in the fund right now versus what's supposed to be for the fiscal year. So it doesn't, some of these, like Jen had 95.
Yeah, that was my error. There's 86 in there right now. Yeah.
Yeah, so we have 86 in there.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so, I know we had a little
Yeah,
informal discussion,
yeah.
but I don't know if everybody, so,
Basically, Jackson has 3 buses, and so you buy a bus every 3 years, so your buses are 9 years old. I will say, given the terrain and the amount of salt that you get here, that's a good replacement schedule, and you kept to that for years. In fact, it used to be when Jonathan was the bus driver, he used to buy buses every 2 years, and we stretched it out a little bit. and have kept it there. And I do know that this year that you guys, working with Doug, have had some major bus maintenance issues, so you want to keep to that schedule. As it comes to paying for it, for whatever reason in the past, you've not drained all of that fund, so you wouldn't take the whole 85,000 and then, do the other $15,000, $25,000, $30,000 in taxation. You've left a little bit in there, $25,000, $30,000. And I think the rationale for that was years ago that if you ever had a bus that died or got in an accident, at least they're going to give you about 10 cents on the dollar for a bus. So that at least you have a little bit of money in the kitty, so that if you had to go out, for example, Bartlett had to do this years ago, buy a used bus, at least you had some money in that account to go to a used bus place so you could at least keep 3 buses in the rotation. And you've actually had to borrow buses from other districts this past year because even, you've had, like I said, there's 2 regular buses and a spare. You've had your regular buses go down and the spare go down, or whatever it is. 2 out of the 3 were down. You actually had to borrow buses from other districts to keep some routes going.
Jim, are you having a hard time finding parts for buses that are down right now?
No, but service is it took me a month to schedule my inspection on my car for crying out loud.
That's why I asked.
It hasn't been the parts. As an example, we had, I think it was your bus and or Bartlett's bus, had to go back to the dealer for something that felt like it was out of, in your case, Valadares wheelhouse, and had to go back to the dealer. And just the logistics of, they had COVID issues with their drivers coming to get the bus, and it was a situation where we didn't want to drive it because we didn't know how bad it was. And then when it's there, then getting in the queue with 30 other school districts to get service. It's been, I haven't heard of it being a parts issue. I think it's more of a manpower issue. But it's been you're definitely not alone.
But it's working so far with the 3-year rotation, and we struggle to
And particularly in Jackson, you do not want to get off that rotation. It served you guys very well for a very long time.
So you're thinking that we should put $30,000 into that fund this year?
What do you got in there?
So if you did 30,000, you can purchase a bus and your reserve fund would be essentially zero.
So we need to add more if we want to have a reserve fund remaining.
So we could add the 30, but not full.
And I think what you did, actually, if I go back to 2019, I think you did a similar type of thing. You had a warrant article to put $60,000 into the reserve,
Right.
and then you took out the 115 and left whatever was the balance in there as seed money for the next bus, or if you had a bus that got into an accident.
So we're thinking 50,000 then?
Well, I'd still put 30 in, but then we pull.
Seems like we have to put 15 if we want to have reserves in there.
Yeah.
So that would be my recommendation.
That would be fine.
All right. All right.
And then we keep that in the back of our minds for when we discuss, if we have unspent money from 2021, 2022, we can think about giving back ordinarily money because of that kind of fund.
That is an excellent idea. And just to touch on, Jim, when we were talking about when we came here, you're putting aside $15,000 a year. It doesn't take, you're talking $45,000.
We need to
That was great 10 years ago.
Right.
But now these buses at 150, you probably should be putting more like 25 or 30 every year.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, now we need to.
With that strategic plan, one of the things it talks about for maintenance, and I consider vehicles part of, maintaining vehicles, is to keep that tax rate level. And so you're not having these peaks and valleys in the tax rate. You should be looking at probably aside those amounts.
It's just educating the voters of cost increase and those types of things and why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
So just making sure we're doing, and yes, to your point, 50 this year, but next 25 next year, go forward, or 30, whatever we're comfortable with. Okay.
And some of the years that we've had some leftovers because, we budgeted $85,000 for a purchase and it was only $76,000 to actually make the purchase. We typically take it out of taxes rather than taking that out of the capital reserve fund, but depending upon where other things are at in the budget that year, so. So $50,000 for that?
Yes.
Yeah, put that on there. Okay.
Okay. So those are, well, then you have Article 4, which typically has $3,000 on the warrant for the Whitney Maintenance Trust Fund, and it looks like you have about $47,000 in there right now.
You should be good with that, right?
What's that?
You should be good with that.
So this fund, it also has to do with the average amount of money that the Whitney Foundation is generating every year. So that's what we try to match it to that, so that that's where the money comes from. And that's the contractual obligation we have with this building, with the Betty Whitney Foundation. And to get a sense of what that number should be in there, we have to know what the average is that fund is generating. Do we know that, Kevin? Should we try to find that out?
I don't have it right now, I can look that up.
I think we should probably, to me, that's what I would look at it. It's the number that should go in there is, it should match basically how much funding is, how much extra money the Betty Whitney Foundation is generating every year. And it wasn't all of the money the Betty Whitney Foundation generated. It's a portion of that money gets donated to the school, but then it has to be split how it's used. And that's why we have things like the Friends of the Whitney Center and such, but that's the number that we put in there. So that's, it's not coming out of the taxpayer pocket, it's actually coming out of the Whitney Foundation.
I'm sure during COVID it may have been a little bit lower than.
Yeah, I mean, typically it's right around $11,000, and then what we put in there is usually like 9 or 10, so that it's below what it actually is generating, so that we're not taking more than what's there, meaning that we don't have to get extra money from the taxpayers to fund that. We always want to try to target a number that's a little bit below what is expected to generate.
We do have $9,000 in the operating budget for the Whitney Fund, and this article is in addition to that.
Okay, so with this in mind, do we want to go back to Article 1 and put a figure in there?
Yeah, or are there other warrant articles that people wanted to discuss?
That comes down to the facility building, which, depending upon where we want to go with that, so that would be the next thing that we want to talk about, basically, is where we're at with that and where we want to go with it. We want to have a warrant article there for a bond to build an addition, or do we want to put in the operating budget more money to further explore the addition? I think where we're at right now, as far as the design is concerned, if the board wants to put it on the warrant, I think we're ready for that. It's just there's other things I think that we need to consider before we actually want to put it on the warrant. That's why we started the conversation. So I guess, Jim, did you bring plans? I brought plans.
No, my truck's at the shop, you didn't inspect.
So Mike's come up with, Mike Mature, the architect that we hired, has come up with pretty detailed plans anyway that is enough to get the ball along as far as where we want it to go. Did he get back to you by any chance on the cost estimate at this point in time?
No, just what he said to us when we talked
Okay,
about the.
So when we got the initial cost estimate on this about a year ago, or a year and a half ago, we were talking about a $1 million addition. And we were thinking that a $500,000 contingency plan would probably be smart along that. So we're talking about a bond of $1.5 million. Building costs have doubled. Now we're talking a $2 million building. Would you go with another $1 million contingency? Probably not. I mean, still $500,000 probably good enough for a contingency. I would say that every single building project I've been involved with in this town, this building, the last school addition, the town garage, and the library, all went over budget pretty quickly. And that we immediately had to start turning back what the final product was going to be. And for me personally, that's the thing I'm most worried about right now, is that we're looking at a building that was supposed to be $1 million, now it's $2 million because of building costs. That's a big ask. It's a big ask for the town. And the thing that I weigh most heavily right now is that we're also considering as a town constructing a fire station that started out at 2.8 million and is now 5.7 million dollars. And the selectmen didn't even know we were considering an addition to the school. And since they found out about that, it's like, is it time to kind of start talking to the voters together so that people know what we're talking about as capital outlay, either for the very near future, meaning are we going to have a $5.7 million warrant on the town warrant for a fire station, plus the $2.5 million addition to the school, without even going to the voters beforehand and saying, where are our priorities? And that's really kind of what kind of worries me the most about what we're asking of the town. And, you know, if we put this on the warrant now, and the town puts it on the fire station on the warrant now, how much good conversation is going to happen between the voters and the respective boards? What I would suggest that we do is we get together with the selectmen and we start talking about capital outlay and what our priorities are. Because it's, to me, it's just a big ask, and there's too many unknowns, and nobody can tell you right now whether its building costs are $350 a square foot, $450 a square foot, or $650 a square foot, and where are they going? Everybody's kind of guessing that, and hoping that the numbers go down over the next year, and it looks like they might, but it's just a guess. And when there's too many unknowns about building costs and whether contractors are available and whether even materials available, it's just, to me, it's a scary time to be building, period. And then in the context of what's the town doing as a whole, to be considering something like this when we're talking about increasing the tax rate by about $1.50 if both of these projects pass. And as a school board member, I want to know what the priorities of the town are. And without knowing that, I have a really hard time endorsing this type of project. Meaning, like, I don't want to go to the voters and ask for this without knowing, where do the voters see our priorities? Can we afford everything? Or do the voters only want us to put forward to them one thing or the other? And when we're two different boards here, we've got the select board and the school board doing things completely separately, I think it's time that we get together as a whole and find out where our priorities are.
So Jerry, that sounds, thank you for the overview, I really appreciate it. How much is the select board thinking this way? Or, and is there a time that we can coordinate that? Or if we say, you know what, we might need to table this for a year, is the select board gonna move forward with the fire station plan, and we're gonna be coming off the cuff of having, you see what I'm saying? Like, is there coordination that's going to happen? And is that intention also from the select board? And are they willing to wait to do the fire station addition, or the brand new fire station? Or is this gonna just put us behind? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
It makes absolute sense. And I've been struggling with this personally. I'm on the fire station committee, so I know about where that's going. On December 28th, the select board has indicated that they're going to put the $5.7 million fire station on the warrant. That was from this past Tuesday's select board meeting, and I know one of the select persons knew that we're talking about school addition. One of them did not, and I don't know about the other one. The other one knew that or not. And I think we just need to kind of get together and start talking about capital outlay a little bit better. And also
before December 28th.
Well, before December 28th, I'm doing everything in my power to talk to selectmen about not putting that on the warrant. Not just because of what the school's doing, but because I think it's personally insane to be thinking about a $5.7 million fire station without going to the voters and thinking about where are we as a town? Is this where are the priorities? When there's other options. And that's a little bit different with the school, because I think that what the design has been put forward, it's a really good plan and it really meets our basic needs. Not that we're not meeting our basic needs now, we are, but to modernize the school campus and to really kind of make it work a lot better, and also give the option for a preschool. you know, we need to do this addition. And I don't see any other options out there, versus the fire station does have options, but what does the town want? Does the town want to drive into town and see a beautiful fire station that functions really well? It's again, the fire station that we're talking about, it's a bare needs fire station. It's not like it's above board, but the placement of it and the look of it is one that's going to enhance the character of the town. But it's going to cost us a pretty penny. And it's really those costs that just have me scared about both projects. It's like, I don't think it's fair to go to taxpayers and ask for a lot of money when if you waited a year or a year and a half to know that you could have saved yourselves $1 million. You know, it's, and the fact that we don't know that right now is why I'm most concerned.
I think it makes good fiscal sense to go to the town. I mean, we're elected to represent the town and make choices fiscally, but to work together with the selectmen as to what we bring forth to the town as a plan just makes more sense from a government standpoint as moving forward as a community. But getting them on board, I couldn't even get them to talk to me about an annual meeting during COVID and respond to me after several messages and emails. So somebody else can try and working with them to come around, but maybe there's somebody else on board. I've been woefully disappointed with them.
But we could do our own part in that. So I mean, we haven't presented this to the public much, other than the standpoint that we've been talking about this for a while. I mean, we have hired the architect, and the town should be aware that this is what we're thinking about and discussing. But when it comes down to, you know, the meat and potatoes of this, actually putting the bond out there, I don't know that we've done our work as far as doing this. I mean, like between now and so we do this, we have to have a bond here probably by January. Let's see, it's probably January 30th would be about the latest we have a bond hearing. The bond hearing will be separate than the budget hearing. We have our ordinary budget hearing, and when you're doing a bond, you actually have to have a bond hearing that's separate from that. It can be the same night. Might not be the best idea, but for us, that probably could be the same night. But there'd be a separate hearing for the bond. And so should the first time we present this to the voters be the bond hearing? And that to me is important.
So, I have a question. So, last year, when we put this in the budget as a warrant for $70,000 to hire an architect, we said very clearly, this is, when we goal set for this whole team of people, in our goal setting, we said that $70,000 for the architect was full on, so that when we get to these warrant articles, we have a warrant on this year, like coming up, to be building onto the structure. Like that was the entire intention. Like the conversation that as I remember it, was we're going to ask our taxpayers for this money, so that next year we are asking them to build this addition. And in all the goal setting that we did, that was the conversation. And so if the community doesn't know that that's what's happening, and the taxpayers aren't aware that that $70,000 was for this, I don't know how that falls short. So that was the entire intention, was that we were going to get to this. So we have one regular board meeting left before our big meetings, right? And so the intention was that the design would be done, that we as a board would be presenting to the town an addition, right?
So you're absolutely right. That was the case. But the two big changes that I see in that is, first and foremost being when we were talking about this last year, or a year and a half ago when we were really talking about this, building costs were on the high end $350 a square foot. And now they're $650 a square foot. And that makes a huge difference in my mind. It just does. And the uncertainty of being able to get contractors and to build things on a timely manner is just concerning to me. And I think that those are the reasons that I think it's more fair to the taxpayer to wait to table this for, not putting it on the warrant for this year and seeing where things go from a construction standpoint. And the only other thing I'll say towards that is that we get 12 people at our annual meeting. I mean, last year we had 12 people. The year before that, I think we had like 8. And so how broad a spectrum of the community are we really reaching? And
Well, the year before that, we had like 300.
Yeah.
Well,
You just tell them we're gonna raise the taxes, and then everybody for the preschool, and then we talk about this.
Preschool, they'll come.
Put this on the warrant, we'll have 300.
But as far as the design of the building is concerned, you know, I think we're ready. I mean, we are ready from that standpoint, so I think those are things we have to consider.
I agree. I think that it is a crazy time to build. I think that there's like a question of integrity of how we want to move this forward. And then there's this external thing, which is getting scooped by the select board for this major capital improvement, capital campaign for town improvement. And it's like, we don't know how that's going to play out, right? Like, is that going to fatigue the taxpayers of Jackson to say, we just said yes to that big thing. We're not going to say yes to something else. And that is like, that's yet another unknown in this. I think that if we do think that we should table this for a year, I think that we should think very expansively about how to communicate to the town about it and explain that more so than just like at our annual meeting with 12 people and really put a campaign together, say, you know, here are the designs, we're ready to go, we're waiting a year to look at building costs comes down, the school board is 100% behind this, you know, and we are also, you know, making this choice, and then try to pump that information out so that people feel like it's happening.
And then how does that also table then the other goals that we have set forth as a board
Yeah.
to try to pursue? Are we just going to keep tabling things?
Yeah.
Well, that's, and again, it's how do you view goals and how do you meet them? You know, the goal of the school board is to provide a functioning educational environment in the school. And, you know, other kinds of goals are kind of absent of that, but I mean, I know that this is one of the goals there. But do you just press forward like that because we have a goal for it versus should it be done in a different manner? But one of the other things to consider is that it's because if we don't put it on the warrant, tabling isn't a good word because we don't want to table this. We want to keep moving it forward. And so what would be the next step that we could do this year, instead of just tabling it and not considering it anymore, how can we move this project further along? If we take the square footage and multiply it by 650, we can come up with a pretty good estimate on what this building is going to cost and what we should bond it for. But it's not a very good number. We could put money into the operating budget to do some more engineering and spec out this building so that we know roughly exactly how much it should cost. Or exactly what the square footage is going to detail as far as getting it there. That would be the next step. So whether you put that kind of money into the bond and do it that way, or we can, if it's not the kind of dollar amount that you really need to spend to put it in the bond. In other words, for the fire station, for instance, that $5.7 million includes the soft costs. So what are the soft costs? The soft costs are the engineering studies that need to go into speccing out the building, from how much is it going to cost to move the dirt, how much dirt are you going to need, and exactly what kind of door mounts are you putting on the doors. That's what a building spec out is, and that costs money, the soft costs that it costs to do that. We haven't included that yet into this project, but for the fire station it is. It's about $400,000 or $500,000 in the fire station as soft costs. This type of building project doesn't need that kind of soft cost money. It probably needs more around like $50,000 to $70,000 probably, Jim, you think? Or, yeah, but that would be the next thing that we could question. We could ask, in fact, we did ask Mike to come up with an idea of what the soft costs were going to be for this.
Well, and that's the thing, so have we as a facilities committee fallen short because we should be there by now?
No, because we didn't put enough, we had $70,000, which basically gets you this, what we have. And even that's not an exorbitant amount of money to spend on architectural fees for that type of thing, Jim.
The last time you guys went through a building project, and as a resident of Conway that didn't do this, I applauded Jackson for doing it. You took 5 years prior to, instead of doing a whatever it was, a 20-year bond, you squirreled away for 5 years, half of the project cost, and then you went out for like a 10-year bond. And, you know, maybe there's a happy medium. If you put a warrant article, I'm just going to pick a number, $250,000, and put that on the warrant for a building reserve, that's going to get people to show up. It might not be 300, it might be 200. And then you've got your architectural drawings at the front of the room saying, this is the seed money for this project. If you like it, good. If you don't, you can vote it down.
And that type of warrant article would be worded as to design and construct in addition to the current building. And then how you word that warrant article is important, so how you can spend the money to do it. That's actually probably a pretty good idea.
Set it up as a reserve, you know, and then if people thumbs up, good, if thumbs down, no. The problem is, you're gonna see a little bit of a blip, you know, for $250,000.
You do have $89,000 in your maintenance trust or special projects. I mean, I don't know what the intent was for that, if it was established, but.
Last time we did the addition, we specifically looked at that language again to see if we could use any of that money there, and I don't remember what the answer was, so that's a good time to probably ask that question again to find out how much of that we can use for design.
But I think that way you're gonna get a little bit better feel of what the pulse is, you know, if you're adding, you know, if you're asking 50 grand, 70 grand for architect, yeah, every day.
Right,
But-
but $250,000 gets people's attention.
Yeah, you know what?
And I think also working with the selectmen, and then, you know, as we move forward to say, where are we in alignment, moving forward with the community, makes sense. And maybe that will get their attention as well, or get the community to get the selectmen to pay attention.
And I will have to,
Yep.
along with what you're saying, is that from my standpoint, dealing with the maintenance items, it hasn't been a lot of the material cost, but finding contractors has been a bear. Like, when we've got the guy coming into Stanley Tower to do the window at the SAU office. I've been waiting 6 months. I met with him over the summer. Just can't do it. I mean, it's a 2-day job. It's
I
just.
can't get someone to redo our deck. It'd be
I
July
know,
1st.
right, roofing, all that stuff.
All
It's
that, that's
not-
little stuff.
It's the little stuff, you know, the person with a backhoe or something you might find, but getting the subs and the carpenters, the electricians, and the plumbers, if they're coming, then they're gonna.
So if we do this, so it sounds to me like one viable option is to put a warrant article for $250,000 reserve that we word so that we can also use it to potentially take the first step to spec all this out, because you were saying, so we're moving forward, we're not in a tabled position. Then what I think we need to do is talk about how we want to present this to the town at that meeting, whether there are 12 people or 200 people, so that we feel like we're in really good alignment on that. And I think my take is that given what's happening with building costs, that's probably the smartest move. And Jim, I appreciate that suggestion as a way to take the pulse of the town, but also get some skin in the game, right? It's like, let's actually, see if we can.
I don't know.
Yeah, I can tell. And you're like, wow, my goodness. I think that the other issue about the select board is, like, yeah, I mean, Jerry, do we just deputize you to just go advocate like heck for the next 2 weeks to see if like that can not happen, or is that ship's gonna sail and we're just gonna be drafting behind it and, $5+ million no matter what?
I think in regard to that, one of the things I want to propose to the select board to see what I want to find out if we're in agreement with is that we should have a joint subcommittee for capital outlay.
Absolutely.
So that we know what it looks like. And, every year the planning board kind of asks us backdoor, and I'm the worst person to ask for this, but they do it every year. What's the school's 10-year capital improvement plan? And the town's had a 10-year capital improvement plan since as long as I've been here in 1977. And since as long as I've been here in 1977, the town has never followed the capital improvement plan, ever. Other than how it buys school buses,
Yeah.
how it buys plow trucks and
Yeah.
police cruisers and those things. And that's really what you need it for anyway. But for the larger things that are big ticket items, we've never followed the capital outlays. And so it's like, we don't need to fix what isn't broken with it, but the capital outlay projects that we're talking about, we should do as a whole.
Yeah, no, I think it'd be really great for the town
Then
to
we
be able
get
to
better
say,
information from the voters as to what wants to happen. And I can tell you, Mike, is that the fire station committee people think that if the school goes forward with it, the town will definitely support the school, but then definitely won't support the fire station. And so they can, that thought goes both ways. That's what both people are kind of worried about, which says again to me, it's like, why are we afraid of asking the voters what they think before we do
Well,
this?
that's exactly, I mean, that's just a defensive mentality, but I think that by us, you know, in this meeting saying we are going to not table, but whatever we're going to, you know, we think that that's the fiscally responsible thing, we're kind of granting them that kind of go for it. And it would be nice to have a matter-of-fact conversation that us them could choose.
The only
Join
thing-
us in that.
The only other way to look at it though is like $250,000 is a lot to ask there. But it does start the seed money pretty well. The first year bond payment on a $2.8 million bond is about $110,000. So it's more than half of what a $250,000 warrant article would be. But I think that I like the idea of putting a warrant article there for $250,000. Really engage the public and say, you know, this is what we're doing. Let's talk.
Jim Hill did not come up with this number, by the way.
No.
When those 300 people are here, I don't want eyeballs on me.
Jim, we're gonna put your name on the
Yeah, I can
ice.
see
It's
that.
gonna be
I can
great.
see what this is.
I have another question with the facilities committee. So in addition, I like the money. Do we have a plan, or was there a plan put in place that while this construction's going on, where and how is school going to go? Like,
So
how-
this is a multi-year project. It's not
Right.
like we're going to start construction on June 27th and then end it on August 25th.
Right.
It's going to be phases, and there's no way to determine what the smart way that's going to happen. The next thing that we want to be doing is talking about, like let's say that a warrant article passes, then we start talking about how do we put this out to bid? And it's usually probably going to be a select bid process where we would choose 5 or 6 construction.
I get all that, but I'm saying.
But this is what I'm talking about. So after that happens, then you would start to engage conversations with the general contractor to know how are we going to phase this project. Do we start with the bump out to the old classroom there, or do we start constructing the new piece over here, or do you do it in between? Those are unknowns that you won't know until you actually can engage the general contractor that you're using, and how are you going to go through the project. But
So
it's a-
we're assuming that we're gonna be able to at least use the facility in some capacity during construction at some point.
Yeah.
It's not a total tear down. I haven't seen it yet.
So it's, the tricky part is going to figure out how do we, so the core of the building, the middle part of the building is going to change a lot. And that's what you're going to have to do like in one season in the summertime. And that's going to be a pretty tall order. And even that might have to be phased in certain ways so that, you know, once construction started, it could be a 3-year thing that it takes to do this.
Somebody have something?
I was just gonna say, I was here for the last edition, and we used storage containers for furnishings. We moved classrooms around as need be. You know, we were creative in how we kind of got the bulk of it done.
You got this building now too that you didn't have last time.
Right, we didn't have this Whitney Center, and then we spent a lot of time trying to keep all the teachers. It was hard to work, you know, with the K-1, with the equipment.
I had a baby that year, so I.
Yeah. So Kristen, look at Kristen say, remember that? But the team wanted 3, right?
But it's not going to be fun for the
Okay.
staff, but that's
Right.
what, it's going to be conversations between the principal and staff.
I feel like that's also like a down the road.
Yeah, I was just curious, like, where, you know, money, whatever, so, but I'm for putting 250 on.
So we want to word an article that's going to be for $250,000 for, just make sure that we don't get limited how we can spend the money. So it's going to be basically for the design and construction of, not the design or the construction of, in addition to the school.
I'll check the language of the old, the
Yes.
one that's currently there, or would you like a separate trust fund?
We're probably going to do a separate trust fund because I know the last time that we looked at this trust fund, we ran into a little bit of difficulty also because it's a trust fund and not a capital reserve. It was a little bit of a problem, as I recall. But a whole separate warrant article that would either roll into a separate bond some year or, and the other thing too about the $250,000 is that that's a lot. It's probably more money than we need for speccing the building out. And if for some reason everything tanks and doesn't go anywhere, the money always goes back to the town. It's not like if we put it into that fund, it can never be used
50K going into the bus fund. We did not give the money, we want to be okay with Article 1, so that we can vote on these.
Can we just do what,
We want to do
the budget?
yep. 2,840,639. So we have to change that number after this discussion, that's what we're waiting for. Yep, so we're making sure, and then the 3, well, we're gonna wait for Article 4 to see what they get, but it's usually around 3. Okay, we need to vote on that?
No, because
Right now, right?
what you'll see in January, and January 18th will be a draft. These will all be drafts. And then at that meeting, you'll take a vote to place them on the warrant at that night.
The way that works is at the budget hearing, we present the warrant that we prepared. And then after the budget hearing, we actually vote to either recommend those or not. And what that does is it gives you the opportunity to amend anything or withdraw anything if you want to before you actually vote to do it. So if we get, 40 people at the budget hearing saying, why aren't you guys voting, why aren't you passing, are we getting a bond for this building, or why are you doing that at all?
Can we make that choice then?
We can change it then.
If we have resounding support and everyone's like, I don't want to build a fire station, I want a school because I believe in education, can we that point, like, I'm just
That's on the
asking.
18th?
Yeah.
Well, that January, right.
Is our budget hearing that night too?
No, the budget hearing's in February. The problem is if you wait until February, I don't think you have enough time. for
And where do we
noticing.
fall, and it's also like where we fall with the whole kerfuffle a few years ago, where the town meeting and the school meeting and how all that played out. So where do we fall now? Like, we're first still, right, before town meeting?
We should be.
But we're, like, we're,
No, we don't have to be.
the trustees
I
of
don't,
the
I don't
chapter.
think, because there are very specific boxes that need to get, this is a tax exempt bond. And if you don't check off every box, then it avoids its tax exemption, which is a major,
Yeah, yeah.
it's actually special bond counsel. I think you're at the point that you either have to say, now we're gonna do
Yeah,
2.5 million, or
Yeah.
we're gonna do the 250. I don't think you can wait
Okay.
until January to do that.
We could technically, but when I backed off the date, when's our annual district meeting?
March
March 1st?
Third.
March 3rd, okay, so we're talking about January 18th would be when we'd have to have a bond hearing. So Jim's right, tonight's the night we'd be asking for a vote. Because we'd have to figure out when the bond hearing has to be, and I think that it would, so our meeting's March 3rd. What's 6 weeks before March 3rd?
Yeah.
Yeah, January.
Right.
Yeah, around January.
You're pretty close.
It's like 60 days before the March 3rd? Is that what you're saying?
6 weeks.
6 weeks.
6 weeks, well, you're pretty close.
Yeah.
You know, it's almost January 1st.
January
And
20th.
I think the window is 60 days, or whatever the window is, it's tight for a bond, so it's tonight or not, basically. It's not cool about that, I guess, so, there's no reason too that we can't take a formal vote on that, of what we want to do with this. Unless we're just in a consensus, that we're not putting it on the warrant.
no, I mean, I want it all. I want to do that, and I also want, like, I think what I want is for the town to just do a pause on that, and I think what you're saying, Jerry, makes a lot of sense, which is like talking to the town about, like, how do we want to spend this money? What I'm seeing, and I'm guessing is going to happen, is that we're going to make that choice, but we don't get to control whether the select board's going to make that choice, and those things are going to go to, move forward probably out of step with each other, which I think is a bummer for the town, but I don't know how to solve that in the amount of time we have.
I think we're making a wise fiscal choice to wait because of the building costs right now. We're getting some money together, we're moving forward with maybe investigating some soft costs, those types of things, and then just seeing where we lie. And then also having some more in-depth communication with hopefully the selectmen and the community at large. But I think we're making a wise choice because everything's so inflammatory. Inflation is just out of control right now. And we're not gonna be able, we're gonna have to wait a year to get somebody to even say yes to build.
And
So,
for those reasons, honestly, my take on this community is that if we want to be successful with this project, and I really want to be successful with this project, we have to take this kind of methodical approach to it, or we won't be successful with it.
Well, maybe if we have the warrant article, we can actually do some of the work of trying, like you said, putting soft costs or solicit, contractors, all different pieces of the puzzle to put things in place because we know it's gonna, we want to take the right steps. So, okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
So we're good with what we've done? Warren,
We're
articles,
excellent.
meeting? Okay, so we're gonna move on, thank you, Chris. We're gonna move on to, the SAS testing.
Now you gotta do consideration of Bartlett tuition.
Oh.
Sorry.
She'd rather talk about Sas testing. That's depressing.
So you folks pay a per pupil
Thank you,
cost
ma'am.
to Bartlett. And that per pupil cost is calculated out, and there's a spreadsheet that goes through and it deducts this, that, the other thing, transportation, revenues, whatever specific Bartlett special education. And then they divide by the ADM. Part of the issue is that the ADM, which is your average daily membership, drops significantly in Bartlett, about 20% over the course of the year, through a variety of reasons, pandemic, charter schools, XYZ. So the per pupil cost was calculated at about $23,000, but in reality it's about $27,500, $27,500. So, which left you with a shortfall. And you'll see the shortfall is $84,850. So, right now, you pay quarterly for that. You have money in the budget. So I bring this to your attention because you're going to have to think about how to pay that bill to Bartlett. Okay. So part of it is you typically do have a fund balance at the end of the year. I don't know what that will be. The other part is you do have a tuition trust fund, which has $76,000 in it right now. So, you could drain that down and cover it. I just want the board to be aware of this so that as you move forward, probably in March, you're going to have to make some decisions as to, and you'll have a better feel for the budget as well, as far as what's going to be left over and where you're at. You might be able to cover all of it through the unexpended fund balance, or you may have to take out $30,000 or $40,000 and make a combination of the two. But wanted to let you folks know that money is owed to Bartlett, and unfortunately, there were some big changes in the world.
Kevin, when do we physically cut the check? for Bartlett?
Actually, I think Bridget, I talked to her, I think there's one coming up in January.
Is it quarterly or is it?
It's supposed to be quarterly, I think.
I think
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
The language is in the contract anyway.
Yeah.
But I think it's quarterly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which means March would be the
The next
third quarter, yeah.
So at some point, we're gonna run out of what we budgeted simply for that.
Right.
And I would recommend that we take as much of it out as a tuition trust fund that we can to cover it. We have that fund not really to cover this kind of scenario, but to, when we changed the contract with Bartlett, the contract with Bartlett hasn't always been this way. It used to be that we paid behind a year. And we weren't really too concerned about this type of thing because everything was generally pretty steady. And it's understandable how this year is not. We had a tuition fund basically to, if there was any big spikes that we would know about for the following year, then we could lessen that year's tax impact. But because we changed the contract with Bartlett, then it's kind of in the current year. So I think it's just as well to assume that money's in there for this type of scenario as well. So I would recommend that we use as much of that fund as possible, which also makes us maybe want to consider we might put more money back into it if we have to use all of the money from that this year.
We're gonna put another one.
We need to put another warrant article in there.
Revise it. Yeah, I mean, it's not gonna go down. I mean, their population's not gonna increase, so we're gonna, overall, we'll be budgeting properly moving forward, but.
I guess when we have to make the last payment on the last payment on what we owe Bartlett is still probably gonna take place. Timing, I'm just trying to figure out if we're gonna have enough, if we're gonna know what the undesignated fund balance is gonna be in enough time to make a payment, another payment from our operating budget towards Bartlett without having to touch the trust fund too much.
I think in March, you'll probably have a pretty good feel of where you're at. And like I said, in order to expend that trust fund, all you have to have is a public hearing, and then the board can take that money out. So if you feel like, well, we could probably take $30,000 out in February, you can take it out in March. You can take it out in April. That's up to you folks. You just have to a hearing and some forethought to make that happen.
When we changed the contract too with Bartlett to pay the current year as opposed to the previous year, it was really just, it was more about our bookkeeping, I guess. It was, we would pay the same amount in the end. It's just before we used to do it after the fact as opposed to during the fact. And at the time, why that made sense to me and why it still makes sense today is because of the contract that we have at Bartlett. And this is the exposure that you're going to get when you base it on average daily membership. But we're still way ahead of the game by basing it on average daily membership because we don't pay any equalized evaluation formula. If we did, we'd be paying a guaranteed amount every year that would be pretty high. Plus, we'd be paying a percentage of average daily membership. It's strictly average daily membership at Bartlett, plus a rental fee, I think, is 2%. Which is getting more than fair when you talk about capital outlay over a year period. So it's not fun trying to scramble around and fix this, but I still think it's the best system and the most fair system that we can.
So we should probably put another warrant article on that says we want to raise 30,000, which would cover one pupil per se, you know, or however much, if we're gonna drain it, knowing that we're gonna drain it, we wanna put some money back in it.
Well, again, because we want to have money in the future someday if this happens again.
That's what we're saying, so we should put,
If Bartlett loses, you know,
So we
20
should-
kids again, it goes up again in 1 year, so I think
So
that's.
then we need, so can we just do, can we add another warrant article?
yeah.
You
this
can
is
do
the night to
whatever you
do it.
like, Mike.
That's what we want to do, Kevin.
We're good, we're good.
Let's
Yeah.
add a warrant.
I'll draft one up and then,
Perfect.
for the 18th.
Yes, please. Thank you. All right. So we're good. We kind of have a plan.
Yes.
We're waiting for a
We
figure.
have a plan.
Okay. All right. So now we are back to you.
Yeah, I will be quick, I appreciate it. You guys are doing a lot of really good work. I want to congratulate the board. This is critical discussion. You've taken on some big projects, so good for you guys. With that being said, big project, Mount Washington Valley Cooperative School District Planning Committee. Yes, Jerry and Jen were there, all the different towns. It's a good process. The question before the committee is, do you want to move forward with a cooperative? At the same time, taking a look at several different other options. That was the third meeting. The fourth meeting, trying to coordinate, will probably be at the end of January or the beginning of February, trying to mix it in with all the budget hearings. Attorney Matt Upton will be there. And really each town kind of reports out what they're thinking about. Do you want to own the school? What type of governance? How do you want to fund the operational piece? Blah, blah, blah. And so it's good. I know Jerry and Jen can speak to that, but that's really moving forward as it should be. It's a methodical process. A lot of big things there. COVID and Sas testing. I don't even want to say it, but Jackson, whatever, they're doing well. And we'll be quiet about that. The rest of the community, my appeal to the community is anything that we can do because our medical system is under such tremendous strain right now. Pam and I meet every Tuesday morning with folks from the hospital and the medical community. So the appeal that we sent out was really anything that you can do to help make that, because we're seeing the impact of no hospital beds being available. We're seeing the impact of all those things. So, yeah.
Kevin, what's happening from a vaccine standpoint to now that, 5 and above, and that pretty much covers everybody in the SAU? How much are we, doing more vaccine clinics helping support that?
We can talk to you about that, yeah.
Well, because the letter that you sent out,
Yeah.
right, like it talked about a lot of other pieces of the puzzle, but not specifically about getting vaccinated, so.
Yeah, the stance is we support it. I mean, we volunteered, we've been there,
Yeah.
we put out the literature of what it is.
Mhm.
Be careful not to say you have to do this. We had clinics, last week, and then we did another one a few weeks ago. Looking like there's another one coming up at the schools. It may be similar to what we've done in the past, where it's on-site, in person.
Great.
Make it we're trying to remove as many barriers as we can for people to access, right? That's really, as a community, that's what we're trying to do here. Go ahead.
We did send out to parents, would you like your child vaccinated at school?
Great.
Majority of them didn't.
Mhm.
So what we did was, we partnered with our physicians, the medical team, made sure that people knew where you could get vaccinated, how you could set that up for your child. And then we also provided on-site vaccination at our schools. We partnered with public health, so they treated our schools like homebound people. So if did we end up with anybody?
We didn't end
here?
up with anyone, no.
But at one point, we had one child in the school that needed to be vaccinated. They went right to the school, first dose, second dose, got it done. So whatever it takes. And what Kevin's referring to, the next one is 16 and 18-year-olds can receive the Pfizer booster.
Yeah.
So that's kind of in my future, is setting that up at the high school. And we'll continue to partner with the hospital and Saco River and the community center and public health to get it done.
Yeah.
Pam has done a tremendous amount of work.
Thank
I just
you.
kind of
Adding
show
it
up
out.
and lift heavy things. It's my job. But no, seriously, she's been unbelievable with that.
Yeah.
Pam, it's like a massive asset that like your personal email is attached to the Sas testing, and every parent that has a question, you personally email back, and I think that that's a position in itself, and allow us to recognize you.
Yeah.
Because the work that you're doing is overarchingly incredible, and it's valued by many in the community, so thank you.
Do you want to talk about Sas Testing while we're here?
Sure. So you all approved participation in Sas testing on the 15th of November. On the 17th of November, you had 26 specimens pulled from here. It was amazing. Your community really wants to be involved. Each week that we have testing, we test every Wednesday afternoon. They roll in and roll out as quickly as they can. Great team of people. They're phenomenal with the students. I can't believe how amazing it is to see. These kids it's fantastic to watch them with these kids. Each week you've had more specimens drawn. I'm happy to say that you have a 0% positivity rate, which is awesome. As of right now, you have a total, literally right now, so I was just checking, people are still registering kids every week. More students and staff get registered, and as of right now, we have 43 people enrolled in testing. You won't have 43 tested all the time for a couple reasons, and I'll just take a quick minute to explain it to you. If someone is in quarantine, obviously they can't come in and be tested. If someone's home not feeling well, they're not tested because they don't come in for that. This is only asymptomatic testing. And if a person has tested positive, which you haven't had yet, but if a person tests positive, we don't allow them to participate in SAS for 3 months after their positive test comes in. Because they can continue to shed the virus and look like they're positive. And there's still a lot of dispute if we're considering second positives as a positive that needs to be excluded from school and work, or if it's one to just ignore and say, well, that makes sense, they were already positive, especially with the different variants. I'm not a medical provider, although I pretend to be one sometimes, so that's something we'll be talking about tomorrow morning. We'll be looking at that.
Every Monday through Friday.
So, but but I'm happy to answer any questions about it. It's going really well, and I'm just really excited to see how well the community here is
That's awesome.
dealing with it and taking this really seriously, protecting each other. So
That's really exciting. It went from 26 to possible 43.
That's awesome.
yeah, you've had a total of 146 specimens pulled so far. So.
That's awesome.
That's great, thanks, Kim.
I just put on here more of an FYI, remote days for inclement weather. In Conway, I pitched it and I talked to the SE9 board and Bartlett as well. I said one of the biggest pieces that I am trying to do is be predictable for parents and students as well. Last year we kind of said, well, we might have a remote day, we might not have a remote day. And that's not good. It's not good for teachers, not good for parents, not good for bringing laptops home. So I talked to, like I said, the Conway board and the Bartlett board, and I said, the first 3 days, we're going to let the kids go just play in the snow and have some fun, and teachers as well. And we'll make those days up. After 3, then you're starting to talk about extending the calendar a little bit more, and then we'll go remote from there. So I don't know, I mean, Gail makes the call, she has, but I just want you folks to know this is the plan for the other schools.
Thank you for the proper snow days. I think that's really exciting and kind of important. Gail, do we still do blizzard bags?
Well, that's what I think he's referring to when he
Yeah.
says remote days, it's the same thing now, because Blizzard Bags was coined before we all went remote and learned how to use Classroom and all of that. So now it's a little more sophisticated, but I know my teachers and many of my parents say the same thing you just said, like, oh, we love our snow days, we want to ski, we don't want to. Blizzard Bags were not popular with everyone.
After day 3, I think they're lovely.
After day 3, maybe there'll be less, so I think it's best for us to just go along with the SAU. And then I don't have to get up and call people either, I let Kevin.
It would be hard to have a sibling have a snow day and the other one have a remote day.
Well, I have to find out who your new road agent is. I called some poor sucker at 4:30 in the morning the other day. And he was not there anymore. Yeah, that's good. Just a FYI, annual meeting, you have no moderator and you have no school clerk right now.
Oh, joy.
You didn't have one last
I
year.
know, I got one.
You had a couple people that
Is
stepped
Sasha the
in.
moderator?
Huh?
She's not the moderator?
She
She's no
is,
longer.
I don't think she was,
She wasn't able to do it, so you had to fill in.
right, so
I don't
that's
know,
changed,
does
I
that-
voted in.
Does that disqualify her?
No, she's still,
You are?
we can check. If she,
I think she.
Sasha can come.
Yeah, so Sasha Tracy, last year it was
She was pregnant, she had.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like, and then it was like,
if she's
family
still the
and then
moderator,
COVID,
that's
and-
great.
yeah, I believe she's still on.
I think it's a yearly position.
Right.
Yeah, that's
She
the
was
thing.
voted in as moderator last year,
So
so.
we'll
But
have
if
to-
she wants
it, we'll have to.
I don't think there's a big line at the door for it.
But I think she should be our first ask her, so
Yeah.
someone
Yeah.
knows her.
So if you know anybody,
You want to ask her, Kate?
Yeah,
Okay.
we're on it.
that's it for me. I will.
We'll
be
sell
done.
alarm listening,
Yeah.
right?
Maybe babysitting or something.
Just quickly go back to the cooperative thing, just so we know that
Yeah.
someday, the process is gonna look like at some point, Jackson's gonna have to vote either to in favor of a co-op or not in favor of a co-op. So at some point, sometime in the future, we'll have to, as a board, decide where we're going with that. I already know where we're going with that, but that doesn't matter.
The rest of us have to get.
That doesn't matter for tonight at all, just at some point in the future. But what I would say towards that board is that regardless of whether we go for a co-op or not, we are going to need some sort of framework to move this process forward as to what high school we're going to use. And I think that board would be a great starting point for that. So even if it doesn't decide to go for a co-op, I still think it might be a great board to keep in place so that we can decide as 8 towns what it is we're going to do. So that's all.
No, okay. Yeah.
All right. I think in the interest of trying to get all of us home, I did send you all copies of the ski ESSC and see, so I won't go in depth with that because you've all seen it. Are there any specific questions that you need to ask me about that before?
It'll look basically the same as last year, yes?
It's pretty much the same as last year, with the exception of the Nordic is now back at the ski touring, and the older students will go up to or the more capable skiers will go up to the Christmas Farm Inn, ski down the Yodel to the Eagle Mountain House, and come back around. So there'll be 2 separate programs. And then the ski touring, of course, is continuing to offer us rentals, like they're giving all of the students at Jackson Grammar School free seasonal skis. So we want to make sure that we thank them for their support of our kids.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's awesome.
and it's really beautiful stuff. It's really extraordinary. Yeah, it's really nice.
Yeah, we're very lucky to have them in our backyard.
Yeah.
They're taking good care of us. The concert, so, sadly, we had hoped we would have a big seasonal holiday concert like we always have in the past. And we sort of will, only it won't be here, it will be online recorded. So to Lauren Reeder's credit, we recorded chorus out in the parking lot, distanced with masks on. They sang, we recorded it. The band replaced them, then they played, we recorded that. Every classroom was in here, socially distanced with their masks on. They sang their 3 songs just like they would. The PTO is making cookies like we always did in the past. And so Thursday morning at all school meeting, the kids will be here, see the film of them singing and the chorus and the band for our concert. So at least the students will get to see each other producing some beautiful music, and then it will be on our website for families to share.
Oh, that's a lot of effort.
It was a lot of work for her, and John was the iPad recording man. You'll see, I don't know if you'll see us in the video, but you might have seen us in the newsletter holding. It was windy, and she had big charts with paper on them for the lyrics. So we're out there holding them. John had one, I had one, and a student had the other. It was really a great production, but it was a lot of fun. So.
And even included like dress up. Like
Yeah,
dress
the
rehearsal,
kids dressed up in
everything
their
was
concert
super
outfits.
Yeah.
They were freezing.
Thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
That's
Yeah, it
a
was
lot of
great
levels.
fun.
Thank
So
you.
do look for that.
Hold on to those traditions hard, Gail.
The monthly highlights I won't go over because they've been in EUs, and then if you wanted to see the color photos, I'm keeping them all in a binder so that anybody can kind of look back and see photos and the news from the month there.
Awesome.
Oh, awesome.
And just as a quick follow-up to COVID, those of you who aren't parents, I don't know if you've seen, I have tweaked a little bit the protocols for after the holiday to be a little more strict with mask wearing and distancing. We have taken the tent down, as you see, so we're now staggering, doing individual lunches and recesses. Transportation stayed the same. Most of the instructional pieces I kept in place for now, and hopefully when we all come back from the holidays, we'll start to see it tapering down. So,
Thank you for doing that. Hopefully we won't.
Are 2, 3, 4 still doing recess together?
they are. They're outside and they're masked, and we felt like that was really important for them to have that social time
Thank you.
with the 3rd grade class.
Okay, set date for next meeting, Tuesday. So it's a Tuesday, January 18th.
Jen,
Oh, yes.
nothing, but what popped in my head the last 2 minutes was that how to share this information, what to do with it from here. I think maybe on January 18th, we show up a half hour early in a workshop to discuss the facility.
Absolutely, I think we should have a rendition of it, maybe.
Yeah, that's something that
Yeah.
yeah. I'm happy to give it to anybody tonight.
Yeah, I think that makes sense to
It's only
have.
1 copy, but it'd be good if someone could take it tonight, maybe pass it on at some point. But if we had a quick workshop to kind of go over the details all together.
That'd be excellent. Yeah.
I had some other ideas too about what $250,000 can actually get us, which we might be able to start some of the projects along the way, like the bump out to the old classroom and that type of thing. So if we had a quick workshop, it might help to kind of put some of that information together.
So we'll meet at 5:30 then, on Tuesday, January 18th. Does that work for everybody?
Because I think if you have a workshop, and that's probably the most realistic time we'll have to be able to get together. Is
Yeah,
planning
I think
ahead.
that's a great idea.
And just to clarify, do you want me here at 5:30 or 6?
We'd love your company. But you probably don't need to be here until 6.
Yeah, it's a workshop minutes, we really only need to say what we're not gonna make a decision on anything, so just do why we have the workshop and kind of discuss.
Okay.
5:30 workshop, meeting at 6.
Yep.
Okay. One additional thing, a reminder too, that on the 25th of January at 5:30, we have our strategic plan presentation to the community at meeting, so.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
The 25th.
Yeah, that was the 25th, 5:30.
Thank you for making Tuesday.
Okay. All right.
So I'll make a motion to set the time of the budget hearing for Thursday, February 3rd, 2022 at 6 p.m. in this building.
Second. Everybody good? Okay.
No, we need to vote on that. And I make a motion to set the time for the annual school district meeting Thursday, March 3rd at 6:30 p.m. in this building.
All those in favor?
We'll have our board meeting probably at 6 o'clock right before that, I'm assuming.
We should be able to. Okay. All right, committee reports, the policy committee, we met, we reviewed some policies. I have a couple going back to Gail. We go every other month now because we're winding down as far as reviewing old policies. So the next meeting is February 7th. That's all I have for the policy committee meeting. Okay.
Personnel, we covered it because we talked about it inside the budget.
Okay.
You worked hard.
Great.
Good job.
Any other citizen comments?
I'll just say for the strategic planning committee that we did a big lift on it, and Gail just sent today a draft, so Jerry, make sure you check that out, and let's make sure that we're on top of it, and then we have our, the listening post that we have in January, which I just invited you all to.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Good work, folks.
No non-public? All right.
That was big.
Motion, we adjourn.
1 second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Thank you guys very much for everything.
Thank you.
I have a